Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com.
Hey folks, today we're going to take a look at Millennium Blades from Level 99 Games. This has been a labor of love from the company that's been in the works for some years. You may know Level 99 most famously for BattleCon and a few of their other smaller games that have sort of become cult hits like Pixel Tactics and, for me personally, Cell Swords. Now, each of those games was primarily, although there were variants, head-to-head two-player games, where you're just trying to outthink your one opponent. In this case, Millennium Blades, much like another title from Level 99 that bucked the trend, Ours in the Consortium, is made primarily for multiplayer. And while the theme of this game might be dueling card games, really what Millennium Blades is thematically, it's supposed to simulate the entire width and breadth of the lifespan of a collectible card game. All the way from building decks to selling cards on the aftermarket to buying new single cards to going to tournaments and getting a ranking and getting prizes and promotional cards and everything in between. Which might sound a little confusing to you if you haven't played the game or seen what it's about, but don't worry, I'm going to give you an overview that is actually pretty long, because this game is surprisingly involved. So I'm going to try to keep my beginning and ending thoughts as brief as possible. But in any case, watch the overview, then we're going to come back, I'll let you know what I think.
Millennium Blades is a competitive game for 2 to 5 players. The goal of the game, when there are 3 to 5 players, is to have the most victory points after 3 full tournaments. With 2 players, you use a special duel variant that only requires someone to get best at 2 out of 3 tournament wins, with victory points being mostly but not entirely inconsequential. But there are also other variants as well, like venues that have global effects that combatants must adhere to, and so on. For the sake of brevity, we're just going to focus on the 3 to 5 player standard game here. Setup is the most arduous part of Millennium Blades. The game comes with over 500 cards split into many sets. You also have to put together stacks of money with stickers. Seriously. Remember that this game as a whole is supposed to simulate collectible card games and the variety of expansions that could come out over such a game's lifetime. This is abstracted to a certain degree. Therefore, what you'll be doing is mixing together several smaller decks to create one very large deck that represents a game store's cache of available cards. You'll always use the core set and then choose 5 expansion sets, 4 premium sets, and 3 master sets. These are all shuffled together, which is easier said than done, to form the store deck. All of the sets are comical parodies of other CCGs, video games, anime, and so on. But practically speaking, they each also have their own mechanical bents, with decks being strong and weak in certain areas. Every player starts with a deck of starter cards that are themed around a certain element, as well as some random cards from the store, 3 or 4 cell markers, a character card, and friendship cards for that character. Each character card has 2 different powers, one that's available during the deck building phase and one that is available in the tournament phase. Characters like Fulton find it easier to buy cards, while Cardine starts with some bonus cards. The friendship cards can be offered as parts of trades in the deck building phase, giving the player who attains them extra victory points at the end of the game in exchange for uneven trades. The cell tokens mark how many more sales you're allowed to make in the deck building phase. You'll also have to choose 3 fusion promo decks, 2 metagame decks, and 2 prize support decks. Yes, I did mention that there are a ton of cards in this game, right? Let's talk about the different kinds of cards. There are singles, deck boxes, and accessories. Singles are the core of the game. Each one has a star rating, the higher the better, for winning clashes or gaining points from abilities. Each single also has a different element and type associated with it. These are important, as some card abilities will give you extra ranking points or other bonuses depending on these stats. Each single will also have some kind of special effect that will grant you a bonus of some sort, either right away or during scoring in the tournament, or it may give you a special optional action to perform. You can have 1 deck box for a tournament, and they usually give you a special scoring bonus, but sometimes they give you more dramatic effects. You can also have 2 accessories, which usually widen your options in a tournament with special actions or constant effects. A full standard game of Blades is split into a total of 6 phases. You will have a first deck building phase, followed by a first tournament phase, and then you will repeat this 2 more times. After that, You will determine who is the winner based on victory points. There are 3 boards on which the deck building phase plays out. The store board will be filled with 9 random cards face down from the store deck. The top card of the deck is always available as well, making for 10 cards total. While you can't see exactly what you're buying at any given time, cards from sets other than the core sets will have icons on the back to remind you of the allotment of elements and types that set potentially has. These 2 facets of the game can be important to your strategy. The cost of the card in Millennium Dollars is in the top corner. Below the store are the fusion promos. You can trade in between 5 and 9 cards to get one of these powerful cards, which usually have the same effect, but in different types and elements. For example, one deck consists all of 10 star rating singles, but of different types and elements. The second important board is the aftermarket board. During deck building, you can sell cards here for Millennium Dollars equal to their star rating by using one of your sell tokens, or buy cards others have sold, which frees up their token. Underneath the market are spots for the metagame cards. During the deck building phase, eventually, the top card of each deck will be flipped up, revealing a special condition that will net you ranking points during the tournament, like making sure that you play a wind card or a construct card in order to get more points. These will give you some guidance towards constructing your deck. The third most important board is each player's own mat, flips to the deck building side. This has spots for your binder, your deck, and your collection. Your binder is basically the holding zone for any cards not being used in the other zones. Any of them that are left here before the tournament are just put off to the side to use in the future. The deck area is where you'll be placing the cards that you intend to use for the next tournament. You may have 8 singles in your deck with no doubles allowed. This does not count your deck box and up to 2 accessories, which are also placed here for holding until this tournament starts. During deck building, you may build a collection. This is a set of cards, each with either the same type or the same element, and each of a different star value. These cards will be removed permanently from the game, but you will gain a number of victory points depending on how many you turn in. The deck building phase plays out like this. Each player gets $30 and 6 random cards from the store added to their binders at the start of this phase. The store is then filled up, a new elemental meta card is flipped up but not the other one, and then you must set a timer for 7 minutes and begin. During this time you may build your deck, make a collection, buy cards from the store, remove cards from the game to claim fusion cards, sell cards to the market, buy cards from the market, and trade with other players, possibly giving out those friendship cards as well. After the 7 minutes are up, everyone stops what they're doing and gets 6 more cards from the store deck, and the type meta card is then revealed. Then another 7-minute timer is begun. This is now your last chance to sell cards. Finally, after the second timer, a third timer is started with only 6 minutes and no market selling or free extra cards. After this, each player should have a deck and may have a collection to turn in, which they'll get victory points for right away. The tournament phase, by comparison, is actually pretty simple. Flip your player board over and shove all binder cards off to the side. Your deck box and accessories are laid in their slots, and your deck of 8 cards becomes your hand of cards. Very simply, on your turn in the tournament, you must play 1 card from your hand down to your tableau, starting in the leftmost spot. Then, either before or after you play a card, you may use an action, as denoted on either a card that you've played or your starting gear. Many cards have special abilities that either happen right away or will happen at the end of the tournament during scoring. They all lead basically to the same thing, getting ranking points, which are different than victory points. Ranking points are what you need in order to win the particular tournament that you're in, and actual victory points are handed out depending on which place you end up in that tournament's ranking. Keep track of these ranking points at the top of your mat. Cards have a variety of shenanigans that they may trigger, too much to go into here, but a couple of important notes. First, if a card becomes flipped over, it loses all of its abilities and symbols, including potential scoring, but some cards require you to clash, or at least give you the option to clash. Clashes occur between players' top cards, that is, the card that is furthest down the line that is not flipped over. To clash, each player randomly flips over a card off the top of the store deck and adds that card's star rating to the star rating of their top card. Whoever has the highest total is the winner of the clash and will get some kind of reward, usually ranking points, depending on the card that initiated the clash. When every player is unable to take any more turns due to either running out of cards or spaces on the tableau to play, you score for the round. Figure out what each player's ranking is from 1st to potentially 5th, depending on the number of players. Based on that ranking in whichever round it is, each player will get a certain number of victory points. In the first and second round, players will also get special prize cards as a reward. After the third tournament, it's time for final scoring, which includes all victory points scored from the tournaments, collection victory points from friendship cards that are from other players, and 1 victory point per 4 Millennium dollars that you have left over. Whoever has the most points at this point is the winner.
Alright, so up front, I'll tell you that I played this game with 2 players and with 4 players. 2 players is technically a variant in the back of the book, and as I mentioned in the overview, it plays just a little bit differently, but most of the same core beats are there. It is really supposed to be a multiplayer game. I am curious what 3 players would play like. I think that would probably be the perfect number for this, but 4 players I found to be very interesting as well, and of course had a little bit more depth than the 2-player mode. So I'm not going to beat around the bush here. I have mixed feelings about Millennium Blades. There are parts of it that I really, really like. There are parts of it I really don't like, although I think the good outweighs the bad. So let's talk about the good. First off, I love the scope and the ambition of this game. I mean, really, they reached for it with this one. They had a thought, I forget his first name, Bradley Talton, the designer and publisher at Level 99, he really had this concept in mind of what he wanted to do to simulate the entire collectible card game experience and condense it down into a board/card game. And thematically, at least, I think he's definitely succeeded. It's super interesting how all these different moving parts work together. How you do have the whole aspect of getting the decks together with the whole deck building phase, which encompasses a whole lot of other things. Selling cards, buying cards, trading cards. And you have all these different packs of cards that you can buy, just simulated by the different cards. Mixing all those things together because, in the game, it's been around for like 1,000 years. So, of course, there's all these different types of sets that are out. And I really appreciate all that effort that went into making something like this. I can't imagine the amount of work. In fact, someone that I sat down with the first time I played the game was a 2-player game, which I don't recommend. I recommend starting it off with multiplayer. But in any event, the person I sat down to play with at that point who's just really a casual gamer, said, I can't imagine the amount of work that went into this game. So I really appreciate that because I always want a different type of game. I always want people to be ambitious and try something new. And that also bleeds over into the components of the game. Not that there's anything like, as far as like actual physical components that are all that nice, but the amount of artwork in this game is staggering. And it's very good artwork as well. Fabio Fontes, who's like the house artist for Level 99, and I think there's other artists involved with the game as well. It all looks really good, and there's so much of it. In order to make this game work with that theme in mind, think of all the different unique pieces of art they had to have for every set. The backs of the cards, the front of the cards, multiple cards for every set. It's amazing. It really is. I can't overstate that. Also, tying together with the theme, there's a really good sense of humor that goes through this. It would have been interesting to see if they had taken this in a little more serious direction, maybe. Like Yu-Gi-Oh!, which is like too serious if you think about the cartoon, which sadly, yes, I used to watch. But I like that they did a lot of like silly in-jokes and references and how they named the Final Fantasy but not Final Fantasy theme set like something crazy like that whole Fabula Novella Crystallis thing that was actually a real thing in the Final Fantasy universe. And lots of jokes like Mega Man. I saw in Firefly references. You could just go on and on and on and on and on. Funny flavor text as well. So again, that's more attention to detail in this game that I really appreciate. And as far as the actual gameplay, what I like is the deck building phase. I think that is my favorite part, which is interesting for me because I don't typically like timed segments of games. And in fact, when I first went over the rules, I'm like, this sounds ridiculous. 7 minutes, then 7 minutes, then 6 minutes. This is going to take forever. It's like a huge lump of time of just sorting through cards. Yeah, but it doesn't feel that way. You are frantically getting those cards together, especially if you don't know what you're doing the first time. When I got to my second and third games of this, I'm like, okay, now I have a plan. Now I know what to expect. Now I'm really getting into it. Although the new people I played with were in the same boat I used to be in, because it is a frantic rush and you don't know what you should be doing first. Should I get my collection together first? But I might need those cards, so I have to hold off on that. But I need to be planning for that because you can't neglect your collection. And I need to get my deck together, and I need to get a good deck box. I need to get accessories if I can get them. But I might not, so which means if I don't have the right things, I gotta buy them. But I don't have enough money, so now I gotta sell stuff. There's so many different things that you have to do, but again, it is working together with the theme and simulating what you have to do to be competitive in a card game tournament. So I think it works very well. I mean, there are some clunky aspects to it. It is, you can look at the backs of some of the cards to see what potential elements and types there's going to be, then try and theme your deck around a certain thing, like you want all dark cards or something like that. But to a certain point, you're just kind of hoping for the best. That is the randomness aspect of the game, which will, I imagine, turn a lot of people off. I was mostly okay with the randomness in this game. So for the most part, I think that it works. I like the idea of all the fusion cards, although I wish they were different. Each of the decks is essentially the same thing, just with different types and elements and so on. But okay, whatever. You couldn't go that much detail into the game. So I think that all works very well. It can be a bit of a chaotic mess, but I found it to be interesting enough to sort of surpass any misgivings I would normally have about that sort of thing. So moving on to what I don't like about the game, which is almost everything else. So the tournament phase itself, I found not necessarily like overwhelmingly bad or anything, just very dull. By the time you get to the tournament phase, the fun stuff is over. You've built the deck, you've got your plan, presumably. You get 8 cards instead of the 6 you normally would be able to play, with some exceptions, because you have some leeway, like, okay, I got to change my strategy a little bit, but for the most part, you have a plan, you enact the plan. That's that. Now, yes, your opponents can interfere with that plan, but you might also have reaction cards to take care of that. So the end result is that it's a bit anticlimactic. The fun part is putting together that deck and then seeing it sort of go off, like programming some actions and then watching those actions go off. And it just feels like going through the motions. It almost feels like the tournament part, to me at least, was just a chore that I had to go through before we can go to the next deck building phase and have a lot of fun doing that. There is interesting interactions. I like the fact that there are so many different cards with so many different abilities and actions to take and so on and so forth. And the aspect of the deck boxes and accessories and how they work together, it's another aspect you have to worry about. But again, that kind of stuff, what interests me about that happened already in the deck building phase. So, and it's also a lot of, I'm going to get more about this in a minute, but logistical kind of nonsense, like, okay, ranking points, which are different than victory points, because what you really want are victory points, but you have to have the most ranking points, and it's just kind of weird, and again, it feels kind of tedious, basically. Paperwork, it almost feels spreadsheety when you get to a certain point, when the rest of everything else was frantic fun. So, that leads me into what I think is probably my biggest problem with the game. It's a bit superficial, and yet I couldn't kind of get over it. And that's just how much the entirety of this game is a bit of a logistical nightmare. Because, first off, you're putting together so many different cards in the beginning, trying your best to shuffle them, and then separating them is a big pain in the ass, too. Now, I don't want to be a hypocrite here. I know that one of my favorite games is Marvel Legendary, and that's a huge knock that a lot of people have for that game. But I didn't find it anywhere as annoying in that game as I did find it in Millennium Blades. Especially since the learning curve for this game is so steep. And because there's so many different types of decks, unless you're playing consistently with the same deck loadout each time, which might actually kill some of the fun, because some of the fun is the variety, but if you're not playing with the same loadout every time, you're seeing new cards all the time, and it can be kind of hard to keep track of what possible strategy you should be doing. But again, just physically having to put these together, take them apart, and figure all this out, choose which ones you want to do. You kind of forget, like, what balance is. Like, who cares? I mean, I can't worry about balance, just trying to get all of this stuff together. And then when you mix that with all the little intricacies and the rules, and I haven't even gotten into, like, the keywords on the cards and all the special abilities that they have, exceptions to the rules, things like that, it can feel a little overwhelming. It really can feel like a chore at certain points, intermittently, though, with those deck building phases, which are a lot of fun. And I think that's a shame, because I think that this would be a great game for a lot of people because of the theme, and yet I find it nowhere near as accessible as some of Level 99's other games, including BattleCon. I would sit down and play BattleCon with anyone of any skill level, just I might not have them play certain characters. But Millennium Blades, I think it's a bit too dense to get into for a lot of different people. I mean, it says high intensity on the box. I guess that's what they mean by that. And yet, I can't deny that the theme is amazing, the scope and breadth of the game is amazing, the deck building part is fun, the rest of it just feels like a chore. So that's why I said it's a mixed bag for me. I certainly don't think it's a bad game. I think there's a lot of people who would love every aspect that I just listed, including the ones I thought were bad for me personally in my group. So take it with a grain of salt. I think it's definitely a try before you buy, but you might be even more impressed with it than I am. For me, the overall package I just found was okay because certain parts of it weren't compelling enough. But man, I really appreciate the amount of effort that went into this game. That is for sure. That is Millennium Blades from Level 99 Games.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.